Dark bleatings, everybody! I'm Kaylee, also known as Goat Leader from Happy Goat Horror, and today we're going to continue on with ranking every Stephen King book ever. So we're doing all of the short story collections and all of the novels. If you're just tuning in with us and this is the first video you're seeing, I will link the previous videos down below so you can catch up if you like. We're going in reverse order from worst to best in my opinion, and we're now at the midway point. I've been so excited to make this video. Very quickly before we start, if you watched the last one and you notice I'm dressed exactly the same, it's because I just carried on filming. I was too excited and I didn't want to leave it a day to do this video. I did think about changing so that it would look like a different day, but then I thought, why lie to you? Who cares? The other thing, I just want to show you this little fella. This is a Pennywise goat that my mum crocheted for me when I set up happygoathorror.com, which is our book review website. I don't have a name for him. I can't think of anything good enough. So if you have any suggestions on what we can name this little fella, because he's basically our mascot, I would really appreciate it if you'd leave those down in the comments and then I can pick one. Thank you. So that was your public service announcement. We're just going to get straight in. So we're going from 40 to 31 today. So this is all books that I really love, pretty much. So at number 40 we have Hearts in Atlantis, which is a novella collection of 4 novellas. That's how he usually likes to do it. We've got Low Men in Yellow Coats, Hearts in Atlantis, Blind Willie, and Heavenly Shades of Night Are Falling. The interesting thing about this novella collection is that all of the stories are linked, so you're kind of following someone through their life. Low Men in Yellow Coats is very much a Dark Tower linked story, so if you're a Tower junkie but you haven't come across that one, it's in this book, and that's something you definitely want to read if you're a bit of a completionist like I am. Let's move on. 39. Oh, I don't have my copy with me because I lent it to my mum, but it is Gwendys Final Task, which is the 3rd and final instalment of the Gwendy trilogy. So we've got Gwendy's Button Box by Stephen King and Richard Chizmar, Gwendy's Magic Feather by Richard Chizmar, and then lastly they co-wrote the 3rd one, so Gwendy's Final Task. Sorry, I'm so excited I just started talking too fast and got out of breath. Yeah, so Gwendy's Final Task is the 3rd one. Really hard to talk to you about it or give you a synopsis because I prefer to go into things blind, and because it's the end of a trilogy, I don't really want to talk about Gwendy at all because I don't want to tell you where she is in her life in case you haven't read the other 2. So I'm just going to move on from that one, but it is number 39. Number 38, I hate the edition of this I have, by the way, is Under the Dome. Mini rant, I can't stand covers that are screenshots or movie shots. I prefer cover artwork, and I've ordered this book 3 times from Amazon and they're just betraying me. No matter what the cover looks like when I order it, this is the one I get. So if you hear any scratching, that's my cat trying to get in, and I do think you'll hear a metal clanking sound any minute because my cats like to go up and down the attic ladder, so just ignore that when that chimes in inevitably. Anyway, back to the book. So this is about a town where all of a sudden they're trapped in an enormous invisible dome that just sort of traps this one town inside. And it's really interesting. It's a very beefy book, quite the time commitment. This paperback it's about 1,000 pages, about 900 pages, and it's really interesting because we're following these characters, and since they're trapped in and no one can get in or out, and they can't really communicate very well with people outside the dome either, the ecosystem starts changing. There are weather concerns, water concerns, wildlife concerns. Any and all sort of little secrets this town has starts to come out because they're all trapped in together and people can't get away with things like they might. They don't have outside help anymore, all of that. So villains begin to emerge where people didn't know that there were any. It's really interesting. There are so many characters to hate, love and enjoy following in this book. It's a really good read. It's a big time investment. Well, depending on how fast you read, it was a big time investment for me. Can't say that I was a massive fan of the ending. I felt a bit punked when I got there, but it wasn't enough to did like get me to deter other people from reading the book, and I probably will reread this at some point. So not kind of the ending that I wanted. I mean, he's disappointed, look, just collapsed in despair at the memory of it. But yeah, other people I know really liked the ending, though. They thought it was a perfect ending. So I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments if you've read it. I'd really love to talk to you. Next up, let's move on to number 37, which is The Dead Zone. This is about a guy whose life is on track. The future looks bright. He's with the love of his life. He's quite young. And then unfortunately, he gets into a terrible accident, goes into a coma for a number of years, does manage to come round and wake up from it, but unfortunately the world has moved on without him, as have several people that were very important to him in his life. So yeah, he wakes up kind of exactly the same person, sort of, and everyone's moved on without him, which I can't even imagine. So you're straight on his side, and you know, you want to know how he's going to piece his life back together. But though he has lost many things and people, he has gained something paranormal. So yeah, a lot of people think that this is basically a fortune telling book. It was written a number of years ago now, and apparently a lot of there's a character in here and a political situation that is very similar to something that transpired only a few years back in the US. So people thought that Stephen King was some sort of paranormal whiz himself for a while. Yeah, this is a great read. If you're interested in reading Stephen King but you're not really a horror fan, this is probably a good one to pick up. This isn't a horror at all. It's paranormal, but it's not horror. So I would recommend that one. Next up on the list, look. It's number 36. And I don't want you to make a thing of this, okay? Because I already know. But it's the Tommyknockers, and listen, I don't care. I don't care if you think this should be in the back half. I love this book. It's a little crazy. So this is about a town, and most of them are about a town, I know. We've got a writer called Bobby, who I really, really loved her, and she's takes her dog out for a walk, and he starts digging something up, and it's something very large, and the more they unearth of this thing that's buried in the ground, the more the town and the people in it start to change in ways that seem great at first, but you know, it goes a little dark. I would say that this is quintessential balls to the wall madness Stephen King. A lot of people think it's terrible. I do think that some people are judging it by the movie adaptation, which I personally think is a hoot, but I will admit it's not great. There's some quite silly stuff in there. But I was just along for the ride with this one, and I'm telling you, when you get someone who's writing something as absolutely mad as a murderous levitating vending machine on the prowl for victims, like, I mean, you're either in or you're out for that kind of story, and I was very much in. I love the Tommyknockers. Nothing but fond memories of reading it, and I will definitely read it again. So I'm going to add that to my pile and add that to book recommendations for you all. Just embrace it for what it is, embrace the madness. Next up at number 35 we have another novella collection called 4 Past Midnight, and this one contains, if I'm not mistaken, the Langoliers and some other novellas. Yeah, the Langoliers, Secret Window, Secret Garden, The Library Policeman, and The Sundog. The first two have definitely been adapted. If you've seen the Langoliers, oh, the Langoliers. Again, absolute balls out madness that is the Langoliers. I especially like how they animated the Langoliers. I hear that they're remaking it, and I just hope they don't. Just let people have the lasting image of the original. It's so much fun to watch with friends. The Langoliers is my favourite story in this collection, and then closely followed by The Sundog, which I also really liked. I will say, if you've seen The Langoliers and you've not read it, it does come across much better in the book. It's much less silly in the book. I don't know how they could have translated it to film back when they did it with the resources they had for CGI and it not to turn out that way, but it's it reads a bit differently here, and I really recommend this novella collection. Next up, At number 34, we have Thinner. This is about a man who gets away with a crime because he's a rich white man, and the person who he has wronged, their family do not take kindly to this, and he gets cursed. And that's just the setup, and then the rest of the book is him dealing with this curse. I really enjoyed it. It's quite a quick read. It's like this is probably an average length novel, but it's very short for a Stephen King book, and I kind of flew through it. This gets nuts as well. There's this whole shootout scene, which is really fun. I will acknowledge that this is potentially problematic culturally speaking. There are probably some elements of this where if people told me that they were offensive, I would not argue with them. This is very much an of its time book. I don't think it's the most heinous infraction on a culture I've ever read, but I'm not of that culture, so maybe I'm wrong. But curses. We're dealing with a traveller community here, so there's outdated language in this book, and outdated stereotypes also, but if you read it just as a piece of fiction, just bear in mind the time period it was written in. You probably have a good time with it, but if that's something that bugs you in a book, maybe don't pick this one up. But I thought it was a fun but problematic time. Next up, we have number 33, Skeleton Crew. How do I even begin to talk to you about Skeleton Crew? This is a short story collection, one of the best short story collections in existence, in my opinion. It contains my absolute favourite short story of all time, which is The Mist, which people will argue it's a novella, but in any case, it's in this book, it's in this collection. I love The Mist like nothing else. It's probably my favourite Stephen King story of all time. The reason that this isn't further up the list is just because I can't bump a book up the list just because one of the stories in it is my favourite story of all time, because it's a whole collection, but everything in here is good, basically. This also features The Jaunt, which was absolutely horrific. The Raft, which you might know because there was an adaptation back in the day of that as well, which is a great story. This is a quality collection. If anyone's interested in sort of a deep dive on the adaptation of The Mist, I would love to do that. Let me know if you want to see it. I could do a little compare and contrast for you. I love comparing films to their adaptations. I mean, books to their adaptations, you know what I mean. But yeah, this is a really great collection. If you've never read a Stephen King book and you don't know where to start and you're interested in his horror but you don't know if you'll like his writing style, I'd recommend this. Or there's another short story collection called Night Shift, which is chef's kiss. It's amazing. So I do think that if you're trying to recommend a Stephen King book to a first-time King reader, I always go with short story collections because I think they're the best way to give someone a flavour of his writing style so they'll know if that's for them without having to commit to a novel. And also there's like an eclectic mix of types of stories that they can get, so like they might read one, not like it, but like read another one. I'm always going from the angle of trying to get people to love Stephen King is what that is, probably. But yeah, that is a great collection, one of my favourite Stephen King books. Is great. Number 32 is The Wind Through the Keyhole. Please ignore this sticker. I tried to peel off, and as you can see, it went, why do they do that? Why do they stick stickers onto books that don't have, you know, the right kind of cover where you can just peel it all off in one go? Sorry, that's another little rant I've had. So people call this one the Dark Tower 4.5, so it wasn't part of the main series, but it was a little thing that he wrote after he finished the series. But I read it in order, so this was already out when I started the Dark Tower, so I read this between book 4 and 5. I just loved it. I loved it. It's kind of like, you know, it's a little backstory, little history of Roland, and whole different thing to the main story, but you know, informs his character and relationships he's had and things like that, and I just loved it. If you have not yet read it and you're making your way through the Dark Tower, or you're about to start the Dark Tower, I would maybe recommend leaving this until after you've finished the Dark Tower. the 7th and final book, because you will want more Dark Tower, I'm sure, as I did, but because I decided to slot this in as the 4.5 book, I didn't have any more Dark Tower, and I was sad. So maybe I would put this, I'd read this one last if I were you. And last for today's list, at number 31, we have The Outsider, which is a Holly Gibney book. Basically, so we've got the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, which features a character called Holly Gibney, and then she's very much in this one also. This is about, the premise of this really, really hooked me. So this is about a guy who is accused of committing a terrible, terrible crime, and there is indisputable evidence that he was the one who committed this crime. However, there is also indisputable evidence that he couldn't possibly have committed the crime, that he was somewhere else entirely, and there's a massive stack of proof, like hard, solid, like video evidence, all sorts of things, like absolutely convincing you either way. So what is going on? And that's all, like that's like the starting premise, so that's not a spoiler. I don't want to say anything else about this book, but I loved it. It was so intriguing, and I was trying to work it out as I was going along, and I just couldn't figure out what was happening, but in the best way, because what is happening is very well set up. Yeah, I had a really, really great time reading this. I wouldn't read this if you haven't read the Mr. Mercedes trilogy yet, only because there's quite a big spoiler about what happens in the 3rd book of the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. So if you're interested in reading those, I would read those first and then read this one afterwards, just to avoid the spoiler. But yeah, this is a great read. That's the last book for this video. I'm really, really excited to do the next one, because then we're in my top 30, and as you can see, I've been quite enthusiastic talking about these, so I'm only more and more excited to talk about the next batch. Please let me know in the comments if any of these are in your top 10 or your bottom 10. I always love to talk about that with people, and in particular, if anyone would, you know, talk to me about the Tommyknockers. Any Tommyknockers fans here? Please talk to me, because people make fun of me for loving this book, but I don't care. But I would like to find some like-minded folk to talk about its many merits. That would be super fun for me. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week for the next one.